Hi Year 6, it's my turn again and it's chapter 16 this time. So we've just, Laura's just found out that the fisheries don't know Calvin Redfern, and so she doesn't know where he works, and she's desperately trying to find him because she's trying to get Sky, the husky, and she's worried that Barbara's going to take him to the rescue centre if she doesn't get back in time. So we're here at chapter 16, waiting to find out if she can take Sky. I think she's taken him anyway, didn't get a chance to say no. It'll be fine, Sky's coming with me, so she's got Sky now. Okay, chapter 16. It's not me you have to persuade, it's Lottie, said Calvin Redfern, giving Sky a rub behind the ears. The husky was lying at the foot of Laura's bed where he'd taken up residence as soon as they'd arrived home. There'd been a hint of disapproval in her uncle's stare when he saw the husky stretched out on the clean duvet, but to Laura's relief he hadn't given her a lecture, nor had he had a fit about her acquiring Sky in the first place. Laura had been braced for a confrontation. Weighed down by dog feed and the accessories given to her by Barbara, she'd brought the husky to 28 Ocean View Terrace via the most direct route. The walk up the hill from Fore Street had taken an age because she kept stopping to admire him. To Laura, Sky was nothing short of magnificent. She felt as if she suddenly owned her own wolf, although his aristocratic manner suggested that he owned her. She felt proud walking beside him. All the way home she'd thought dreamily about the wonderful adventures they were going to have together. Sky, for his part, had recovered his confidence as soon as he discovered that he was no longer unwanted and in trouble for making a baby allergic, but completely adored by Laura. To avoid awkward questions from Mrs. Webb, Laura had smuggled Sky into the house and up the stairs. She didn't want the housekeeper seeing him before her uncle did. Upstairs in her room she'd fed him and filled up a big bowl of water for him. He'd wolfed down the biscuits as if he hadn't eaten in days. Laura considered that a good sign, especially since Barbara had told her he'd been off his food. When she indicated that it was fine for him to get on the bed, he'd licked her hand and pressed his wet nose against her. Laura knew in that instant she'd made a friend for life. She could hardly believe her good fortune. He was the perfect dog for a detective. Now her uncle was telling her that Sky might not be able to stay after all. Laura felt the ground shift beneath her feet. It hadn't occurred to her that it might be Lottie, not her uncle, who refused to accept Sky. But Barbara, who gave him to me, told me he was no trouble at all, and he's very friendly, she pleaded. She didn't mention that Barbara had also told her that many Siberian huskies ended up in pet shelters because owners couldn't cope with their unique character traits. They could be highly disobedient, loved digging holes, were always escaping and required a massive amount of exercise every day. But Barbara promised they were also tremendously loyal and affectionate. Laura crossed her fingers behind her back and hoped that he was more loyal and affectionate than disobedient. He does seem to have a nice nature, agreed her uncle. He's a very handsome dog, although he's quite thin and anyone can see he's had a hard time. Well, let's hope that Lottie takes to him. To Laura's relief, he didn't seem in the least bit concerned that Sky had a missing leg. What happens if she doesn't? We'll have to find him a new home. Laura, you need to be realistic. Worst case scenario, we'll have to return him. I totally understand why you did what you did. I'd have done the same in that situation, but you should have checked with me first. Laura jumped to her feet, startling Sky. There's no way I'm taking him back. Barbara will rush him straight to the rescue centre, and I did try to get permission from you. I went to the harbour and they'd never heard of you down there. They said you don't work for the fisheries at all. So what is it that you really do when you go walking around in the dead of night, or is that a secret too, like everything else round here? A muscle worked in Calvin Redfern's cheek, and all at once he was towering, remote stranger he'd been on the night she'd first crossed his threshold. He turned abruptly and strode over to the window. Is that how you think of life here, as full of secrets? Laura didn't answer. She bent down and put her arm around the husky. He licked her on the cheek. When she glanced up, her uncle was watching her. I'm not going to lie to you, Laura. There are no easy answers to your questions. None of this was planned, you know. I never intended to bring a child into this situation. But before you go getting on your high horse, it never crossed my mind not to open my home to you when social services contacted me. As soon as I knew you existed, I wanted you with me. And I love having you here. You'll never know how much. I'm just trying to say that I'm aware of my limitations. As for my job, I do work for the Fisheries Department, but I work undercover. I report directly to the head of it. I patrol the coastline at night and hang around when the catches come in first thing in the morning. That gives me a chance to keep an eye on any boat netting more fish than it's legally entitled to. I've taken good care to ensure that nobody at the harbour knows who I am or what I'm up to. My job depends on it. As far as they're concerned, I'm a retired fisherman who does some work for the Coast Guard. Now, if you have no other questions for the time being, perhaps we should attempt to get our dogs acquainted." Laura nodded dumbly. She called Skye, pleased when he responded to his name, and the three of them went downstairs. Lottie was lying in front of the Aga in the kitchen. As soon as she saw the husky, she gave a savage growl. 3 deafening barks followed. Skye went rigid. Laura lunged for his collar, but before she could grab him, he dropped to his belly and began to wriggle forward, eyes lowered. Lottie continued snarling until the husky rolled on his back and put his paws in the air. A puzzled expression came over the wolfhound's face. She sniffed him at length, and then flopped grumpily down in front of the stove. After a few minutes, Skye joined her. Lottie opened one eye, but soon closed it again. "Looks like everything's going to work out fine after all," said Calvin Redfern. "Could be," murmured Laura, and she knew that neither of them was talking about the dogs. It looks like Skye's going to be settled in, but she's still not convinced by Calvin's story about what he does for a job. I think she might be looking to maybe follow him next time he goes to work. You'll have to see. Read chapter 17. Okay, see you again soon. Bye.